I'm going to start this off with a compliment. You, to me, are one of the most talented people that people don't necessarily off the bat realize is talented. And by that, I mean a lot of people who are funny, they don't realize that they can also sing. They're also improvisers, etc., which you are. So the way I discovered you first and foremost was or were, I'm looking for the grammatical tense that's correct here, was or were your calls on the Stern Show. And you go, that guy is hilarious. He's a great impressionist. But usually you find most impressionists are great singers. You're a great singer. You've got the Hitman. And I want to ask about that first. When did the Hitman start and what's going on with Billy Mira and the Hitman?
So the Hitman was something that I've had in my mind probably for 20 something years. I always, even before I guess the nostalgia kind of came back, I was always a lounge, believe it or not. I know some people, you know, they make fun of lounge singers. I always found it very appealing, that lounge singer feel, that real intimate piano voice, martini on the bar.
Yeah.
Singing the classics, you know, Candlelights, Lovers, Single People. And I always thought, you know, to me, that was always like, wow, I really love that whole vibe, you know, so I developed, you know, this character. But when I got on Fox and I went out to Las Vegas, I was out there for a couple of years. And I used to really, honestly, I was covering the sport of mixed martial arts at the time.
I had no idea about that facility. I knew about the hair metal. I did not know about the MMA. Wow. Keep going here.
Yeah. So, yeah, not a lot of people did outside of Las Vegas. And so, yeah, I did that for a couple of years. And then naturally, of course, but when I was there, I used to go to the TV or the radio studio and I would always be like, man, you know, this is crazy, because even a lot of people in the sports world, they vaguely knew, they had heard I was on the Stern Show. I was like this completely other guy, but they really didn't know. And so I would always come in and go like, man, you know, look at this, I'd be like, I'm in the wrong department here. So after about a year of being there, you know, and they really didn't like encourage that aspect of my personality when I was out there. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the powers that be that I was working with. But one day I just said, screw it. And I started doing stand-up comedy. And I started, I was introduced to some friends of mine that were in a place called The Bootlegger out in Las Vegas, which is run by Ron Mancuso. And that's where he introduced me to the likes of Jake E. Lee. And Jake and I became friends. I became friendly with Kevin Churko, who had produced a lot of big albums. I didn't realize there was a major recording studio back there. And, you know, Eddie Trunk had come out and he said, you know, you got to meet Billy Mira's out here doing the sports thing. And he kind of found out by accident when the director of the entertainment director at the Hard Rock had told him, and he had said, you mean the comedian impressionist? The guy goes, no, the sports guy. And he goes, no, the comedian impressionist. And the guy goes, no. He goes, no, I know Billy Mira. He goes, you're telling me he's broadcasting from, because they were saying, oh, we have this sports guy who does, you know, he broadcasts live on Fox from the Hard Rock. And he goes, you're not talking about the same Billy Mira. And he goes, I heard something, but I think it's the sports guy you're thinking. He goes, no, it's the rock, the comedian impressionist. So anyway, after meeting the people, and then I started singing again, and then I started doing some appearances out there, and I started doing some comedy again. And I started singing with Jake, and it really lit a fire under me. And I said, you know, I have to develop this show that's in my head. So a friend of mine used to come out from San Diego, and we just started working on original music, and I just started casually writing. And then I called at the time, I had called forward to New York because I wasn't sure if my deal was going to end. I knew something was going to come to an end soon. Mm-hmm. And, I called forward to AJ Pirro from Twisted Sister. Him and I had always talked about developing this show, and I was working with a couple of other personalities. And I said, you know, when I get back, I have this show in mind, because I was tired of it. I was like, I'm leaving this. I'm never doing this again. I love it, but it's not really where my heart is. So that's really where I started kicking it into overdrive. So in 2013, when I got back to New York, that's when Billy Mira and the Hitmen had developed. And I may even progress the name. I may just go to the Billy Mira show starting sometime in 22, 23, and leave maybe Billy Mira and the Hitmen just strictly to New York at that point.
I'm learning that all roads lead to Vegas with Hard Rock from what you just said. I didn't know that Jakey Lee was a Vegas guy.
Oh yeah, Jake lives there. Yeah, Jake lives there and he resides there. And it's weird. Talking about 6 degrees of separation. There was a guy that I knew in a rock band called Taiketo many years ago.
Oh yeah, Danny from Taiketo. Yeah.
Yeah. So Brooks St. James is a very old dear friend of mine. And he said to me, I was telling him I got this sports gig out in Las Vegas. I'm going to be, because he was just out there. He was doing like a residency, like a cover band or something like that. And which was at the time, very successful. And I said, I'm coming. And he goes, I'm leaving. And I go, you got to be kidding me. He's no. I go, he goes, no, but he goes, he may run into there. He goes, I heard Jakey Lee is there. And that's when I kind of knew, but I I really literally forgot about it until somebody said to me one day, Ron Mancuso, when I was at the Bootlegger one night, said, you got to meet Jake. And I said, where is he? He goes, he's right across the bar. And I said, really? And I looked over and there he was. And I said, I'd love to meet him. So Jake came over, we sat down, and our whole connection, I started doing Ozzy impressions from immediately, naturally, right? Hey, Jake, it's great to see you, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind an interruption, another compliment here. I always thought that you were the go-to. You and Brewer have your Ozzy offs, but between you and me, you are the preeminent Ozzy impression. So keep going.
I taught him everything he knows, huh? I mean, just like I learned the Pesci from him. So yeah. And then him and I actually started talking about fighting. I didn't know that he was an ex-fighter, Jake. I didn't know that he was a huge fight fan. And that's really how we had developed our relationship. The musical stuff had come later because I knew that he was looking for a singer, and I had casually said to him, I was, he wasn't placing this, comedian sports personality with being a singer until we got together in the studio, and I had helped him prepare for that whole launch of Red Dragon Cartel. And that's really what sparked, the singing thing back in me. I was like, I got to go do this. So I went back to New York and formed that. He went off and did the rest of Red Dragon Cartel, and the rest is history, naturally.
When I say that all roads lead to Vegas for Hard Rock, that's where Roth is supposedly ending his career with the residency. Are you going out to any of those shows, or have you done enough Vegas in your life that you never need to go back?
I can never have enough Vegas in my life. I need a little more Vegas in my life. Viva Las Vegas, my friend. My thing is, when I do go back to Vegas, I'm going back. I want to go back with a residency for this show. We were really going in that direction until COVID hit. And I know a lot of people have really been able to somehow launch it, but my situation is a bit more unique, and I really need to get back in 2022 and get to live performances. That's where I'm going back.
Mm-hmm. So the wife and I are going to, I'm going to 7 of the Roth finale shows. She's going to 6. I guess we love pain and suffering.
Well, no, it's Dave.
It's Dave, and I think he's the greatest frontman of all time. And as a Stern diehard growing up, you're mentioning MMA, David Lee Roth, great Rat Pack era material. You check a lot of boxes for me. That's why I'm a Billy Mira fan. Right. So the connections that I'm making with this whole thing, for a while I just thought, well, that's the guy who does the impressions of David Lee Roth on Stern. And then I was listening recently to an old episode of when Roth got his own show that was syndicated from K-Rock. And the second episode, he actually says the name Billy Mira. And I went, what? He knows about you?
I can't believe. First of all, when did you got to send me that link? Because I tell people that, I was listening. There was a whole thing that we were going to do on Sirius where I was going to parallel his first thing on Sirius. And we wound up not doing it, naturally. And then I was listening to it, and I remember I went, wow, he brought me up on Stern before in an interview, but then, and I knew he knew about me. We had mutual friends. I had heard that he had loved and he had hated me at the same time because it's the way that I had portrayed him, but he thought it was funny as hell, but, and he was trying to really shake that kind of image, because Dave is a very cerebral guy. Really smart, intelligent guy. I love it. I'm actually a huge fan of Dave, whatever he's doing. for many reasons. But yeah, so that that was kind of crazy to hear that the first couple of hours, and he brought me up. I was like, I was stunned. I was like, wow, that's great. Just to have that, to know that somehow my work had affected one of my idols that I had looked up to. And I wish I had worked with him. I got to be honest. If I wish he had stayed, because I would have went and worked with him. We would have maybe hopefully made that show stay, more successful.
That's actually, you answered something I was going towards, which is that really famous people sometimes have really known impressions. And Sinatra supposedly hated all the impressions of him except the Joe Piscopo. Like that, is that what you've heard? That he took Piscopo under his wing, or at least he said, you can do it. And then he hated Phil Hartman and he hated everybody else's. So right. In your case, I was going to go, your impression of Roth, to us, we think it's hilarious, but Roth tried to reinvent himself a number of times over the years. You can look at Crazy from the Heat, and that is a reinvention unto itself, where he's going, I'm not a hard rock guy. Then he gets hard rock again for Eat 'Em and Smile. Then he gets sort of poppy with Skyscraper. Then you don't know what he is for a couple of years. Then he's got a reggae song on Your Filthy Little Mouth. He's a bit of a chameleon, whereas your impression is kind of like 1984, 1985 in a can.
Well, that was the funniest part. See, that was something that had come together in a strange way. I really didn't think anything of doing the impression. I used to do it for friends and family, and I used to do it on stage as a musician every once in a while. We always used to joke around, and I always got a kick out of Dave. And I mean, talk about my career on Stern. I just did two of the perfect impressions at the perfect time. They say timing meets preparation. Yeah. Well, I've been preparing for that moment my whole life because I'd been doing it since I can remember. And it's something that was needed. The Osborne show had taken off. Yeah. And I did the best impression of Ozzy, and that brought me on Stern and introduced me to the show. And then one day I was in there, late 2004, 2005, I think it was 2004. And I said, and Gary had asked me, what other impressions do you do? And I said, David Lee Roth, not knowing, nobody knew at the time that it was going to be Dave who was going to be taken over. But Howard said, book him as David Lee Roth. And I'll never forget it. First time I went in, and I was with Cabby. It was me, Cabby, and Howard. And I went right at Cabby because I had a history with Cabby. So I could, in character, really go at him. I mean, we've become not super friends, but we've become, friendly since then. And because I burned him once on K-Rock way before I even got on Stern. I tricked him, got him to put me on air, and he put me on air with, I think, Sharon Osbourne. I told her I wanted to surprise her, and they put me on with her. And she had said, he's right in front of me. Ozzy's not with me. So then that's where they knew the whole thing was was a trick. But it was a lot of fun. But anyway, we had a history. We went on. And what I would do is I remember saying to KC right before I went on the air, I said, I got this idea for the David Lee Roth character. Instead of just being so flamboyant, I'm going to scream in between little things. And I said, I think that'll make it funny as hell. Well, he went back and he almost died like that. He's like, dude, if you do that, that is going to be hysterical, and Howard's going to love it. Well, after that appearance, I was the David Lee Roth guy. And then that's when that whole thing started. So we started doing all the phony phone calls. And I don't think we made a little bit, when I say history, we made some, well, maybe not. Maybe there was maybe there was one more before that. Ricardo Montalban. I think maybe there was somebody else that had done something similar, but we had done a character, somebody pranking, in a celebrity and voice impersonator, making phony phone calls. And I don't think that had been done before, maybe once. But yeah, we had such a pisser with it. And that leading up to 2005, and then taking over the Stern show with a mock takeover was legendary.
Yeah, I was listening live on the radio when that was going on. I was driving to the train station. I'm not a morning guy. My wife knows not to talk to me if it's a lot of words before say noon. And I was listening to that driving to work where I was working at the time and going, what? He's on the air already? And my mind was blown right away. It took me a couple of minutes to realize that wasn't David Lee Roth doing that show. Is that kind of feedback that you heard from other people after you'd done it?
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I remember it. Everybody has to remember this was before Twitter. This was before
Yes.
Facebook. This was before Insta, all of the social media platforms. But the big thing was at the time were chat boards. So like Stern Fan Network was really the place at the time to go to.
Yeah.
But the news networks, they used to, I guess they would release press things and it was crazy. But what they did see was like a frenzy in, I guess, within the news world that Howard Stern had been fired. And honestly, when I went down, when they had to get me out of the building that day, when I went through, it was only the diehard fans who had there was a sea of people that were outside. And even though we had revealed the joke, they were still there gathered. And I walked out and it was only a few bunch of fans because in those days, we didn't, like I said, we didn't have pictures. There wasn't pictures available everywhere. For like now, everybody Googles me and they can see 50,000 pictures come up. But in those days, it wasn't like that. It was the diehard fans. And when they started pegging me, I was already gone, around the side of the building because they had 50,000 questions for me about it, But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was like, it was crazy. It was a crazy, and then we're leading right up to when, then the announcement came when Howard was going to Sirius that David Lee Roth was going to be taking over for him. We went into high gear, and that's why we did that show. It was a really crazy couple of years. Two perfect impressions at the perfect time.
Yeah. I find the more people I know that have worked with or around David Lee Roth, that he just doesn't comment on things. Even if they're not true, he does not comment. No denials are issued. It's just kind of like he's always looking forward to the next project rather than looking backwards. But you said that feedback did get to you about he likes this, he doesn't like that. Who would deliver that to you? Would it be Gary?
No, it was a lot of people because when he left, I heard rumors through the trade. Because remember, I still, Tom Chiasano, I think, still stayed at K-Rock in those days.
Right.
People still on the inside, interns, and there were people that stayed there. And I had heard, I don't know, and to this day, I don't know if it's true or not, that there were talks that they were going to take me in there to work with him, to possibly either, sidekick or work with him as a personality or a writer with him on the show, which they thought would have been a great FU to Howard type of thing. Because they were vying for a bunch of personalities to stay there before they had asked David Lee Roth to come in. So they were trying desperately to keep that world in there. So that would have been, whether that was true or not, I never asked Dave personally. Like I said, I heard it from pretty reliable sources that was the case. And that would have been an honor. I mean, I would have loved to have done that. But I also heard that from other people as well. His road crew actually wound up coming to a show of mine one night where I was playing a university at the time, and they were playing the arena, not like literally like a stone's throw away. And the whole road crew came and they invited me down to the show, but I had to be somewhere else at the time. And I was honored. And then I went to a show in 2015 and security brought me. Dave was always very great. I mean, listen, I don't know how much he had to do with this, but I went to the show. His security had contacted me and brought me right up to the mezzanine, right up to the front. And they had, invited me there. And so I guess there was some love there somehow, like a nod from Dave.
So,
but we never
admiration from afar, because I'm not hearing, well, when I was with him, it sounds like everything was 1 degree away, all the interactions, like never on the phone with him, but on the phone with the people who worked with him.
Yeah, I think he did extend the olive. I think that that one time, and he did invite me down to his show. His assistant had said, "Please, I'd like you to come," and I didn't come. I couldn't make it. And then that was very nice. The security who happened to mutually know me would work with Korn, and I had met him and brought me right, at the time. And then I think he was traveling with the Van Halen crew. I guess must have spoke to Dave and he contacted me and he said, "I'm bringing you down right up front. You got to be here." And I thought afterwards they were going to ask me to go, but Dave had literally walked off stage with Eddie and they walked into the bus and they took him right out. So
you said Korn. Dave's drummer in 06 was Ray Luzier, who's been with Korn. Small world connection right there.
Probably. And that's probably the connection.
There you go. Ozzy's team that you talked about talking with Sharon Osbourne on the air, not always known to be the most easygoing personality in the music business, to put it politely. But how did they feel about your impression? Was it a all press is good press, or is a don't ever have Billy on anything around us ever again? Was it one of those scenarios?
I think it was probably a little bit of both. I know that the Osborne office had called me once, and Michael Garrisino had reached out to Gary. I think that's somebody who worked at the Osborne office,
Mm-hmm.
and asked me to call the office. Gary had his thoughts about why it might have been. Now, I don't know if it was to tell me to stop doing it, or if you don't stop doing it, who knows what the reason was. Or maybe they wanted me to do some work with Ozzy,
Yeah,
sing, or, because I'd heard some things. So, but I never spoke to them. I left a message. I contacted them as they had asked, and then I never spoke. And then, so no, I don't, as far as Ozzy's concerned, I have mutual friends that are close, but I've never spoken to him. I've never heard him speak about me or anything like that, except for being on the air with him a few times and his, and the kids mentioning me, but that's it.
Ozzy and Dave have some shared people over the years. Joe Holmes played guitar with both of them in the early 90s. They toured together, Van Halen and Black Sabbath in the late 70s. So I was trying to figure out if there's any connection to your impression there, your impression of Dave, or it's just, hey, those are two superstars. You did both of those impressions.
No, those are my go-to when I was growing up. I mean, it's no secret. I mean, my first major influence, which a lot of people didn't know, was Queen, was actually Freddie Mercury. Who to me is like, there's no topping Freddie. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, Freddie was the man musically, performance wise. He encapsulated everything a musician, frontman, performer should be. Believe it or not, my favorites are all piano players. Oddly enough, I wish that I could play piano like Billy Joel, Elton John, Freddie Mercury, sing. That's why I copy their singing style. That's why I think we had great singers to look up to in the 70s and the 80s. But the guy that had hit me at one point, which was Ozzy. And then it was just his personality. It just had appealed to me at a very young age. And that's what it said, because I had been singing before that, but in plays, I was like a dramatic kid. That's why I loved Queen. Queen to me is like, it's like performance art. They're like they're not, I mean, they're like Broadway meets rock and roll meets everything. They're just everything. You could do a whole play with them, with their music, in my opinion. And then I got into the Ozzy stuff. I had appealed to, and then I didn't know about Black Sabbath. It was Ozzy I had discovered first. I was young, and then I became attracted to that. But then naturally, who was the next guy that I would go, was David Lee Roth. And believe it or not, when I really became a huge, huge Roth fan, it wasn't the Van Halen stuff. I was like, when we were younger, we would sit at the lunch tables and we would sit and argue, who's a better singer, David Lee Roth, Ozzy? Ozzy's this, David Lee Roth is this. So I was always on the Ozzy side because that was the first guy I had gotten into. But it was, believe it or not, and which was pretty profound foreshadowment, would be the Crazy from the Heat stuff. That was when I really looked at Dave and I went, wow, this is so different. This music is amazing. And then I became a huge, huge, huge David Lee Roth and then Van Halen fan, and then discovered all of that music, and I was hooked.
Yeah. To bring it full circle, I'm going to say the Hitman is not that far off from Crazy from the Heat.
Yeah. So, just to kind of be fair, I do have lineage, believe it or not, to the Sinatra world. My uncle was with Sinatra many years ago.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, we're not related. We have a family. My uncle was his right-hand guy many years ago. And so there's, he took care of my cousin, Frank. He was great, very good to him. And he was very close with my family. And so there was a whole thing there. So I was very well aware of the music, but it was David who had showed me, it kind of, I guess, put the spark back and said, wow, you could make this, modern in a sense. And how really music was a lot like that. Horns, does it ever get old? Swing, big band music. People love it today. Even kids. I sing a lot of 50s stuff. And you would be very surprised at how the kids are mouthing the word. I go, I can't believe these young kids know this music because it's such great music. And they keep living it. So yeah, it was a lot of that personality, that big band Crazy from the Heat. I thought that was brilliant. When Dave did that, think about how risky that move was. Not now, in 1985, when he did it, when it was, people were listening to new wave and blah, 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 except the fact that you had the Stray Cats, kind of, and Adamant really kind of touching up at the really specifically the Stray Cats. Stray Cats, true, are a shot in the dark, a miracle, if you will, making MTV a rockabilly band becoming big. I mean, it was nuts. So
50s revivalism in 1981, 82, 83. That's a good point I never thought about. And with Roth, we are so used to hearing Just a Gigolo and California Girls. Like, of course that's great. But at that point, California Girls was a 20-year-old song. That's your parents' music. Why is our favorite rock star doing your parents and your grandparents' music?
When Louis Prima, but how many people didn't even know?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, I remember my uncles who were from from Frank, and they were laughing, like going, because David had covered That's Life on the Eat 'Em and Smile album. And he had, and then before that, and they were like, this stuff's been around for years. What are you talking about? I'm like, this song right here, that's life. That's what all the people, with Vi in the background and this brilliant renditions that they were doing. And I didn't know, like how much I knew the catalog, but I didn't know that far into the catalog. So that's what brought me in. So yeah, I could credit Dave with that also.
Yeah, and so that's something I never really thought about, that when he's covering Nightlife by Willie Nelson, he's doing country and reggae on Your Filthy Little Mouth, that album from 94. He might have been thinking, well, I pulled it off in 85 with changing genres. Maybe I can do this again in 94 with older music.
The only thing with Dave at that point, Dave was coming out of such a successful band at that point. He was extremely relevant at the time, and then it's a weird thing, because what Dave and Van Halen had done from 78, I want to say, till, even though they were apart even until the 80s, early 90s, you can't be that guy. You're not going to be the David Lee Roth of 78, 84, doing splits, jumping off. It's, you get older, and those guys would just, that was a snapshot in time that if you were lucky enough to see it, people have no idea how great those shows, those Van Halen with David Lee Roth shows, were out of control great. Those guys were blasted at the US Festival. They were posted, and they still blew everybody else off the stage that night.
So that's another good point you're making. You can't expect your favorite artist to remain that way for decades, but thankfully we have Billy Mira in prime form doing the 1985 Roth. So you keep it going. So
listen, and even that Billy Mira is starting to get up there, but at the same time, it's just people have to understand he's not going to be that guy for a long time. I'm sure that hit when I was always doing that with Dave. I hope, and I think he kind of got that I wasn't making fun of it. I was glorifying it. I was, it was my adulation towards it. It was the way that I was my pay and respect, because it was just such this crazy character, that he had done. And it was my way of saying, you were a major influence on me. And now let's turn this into a character and have some fun with it. And I'm glad I did, because it was awesome.
The last thing I'm going to ask you about before I tell you to plug all your stuff is my favorite of the calls or the appearances that you did on Stern was the one where you as David Lee Roth are trying to book yourself at an R&B club. I think it was maybe in Missouri. It sounded like that guy did want to kill you.
Yeah. So that was all extremely real. That was, thanks to Richard Christie and Sal for orchestrating and finding that particular place. And I don't know, but it was the perfect call. And when he put Dave Lounge, but I still to this day don't even know what he's saying, but it sounds like Dave Lounge. Hey, this is David Lee Roth calling you right now. You ever hear me? I never heard it. But the fact that he says David Lee Rocket is probably David Lee Rocket. He doesn't even call him David Lee Roth. He calls him David Lee Rocket. It was brilliant. It was so much fun. That's one of those bits where if you listen to it, if you don't know the character, somebody was asking me about this recently. They were looking up all my stuff, and a young guy, and he was maybe 25 years old. And he was saying, I still found it all funny, but I don't know the character. And I go, if you know the character, it makes it really funny. You understand the things I'm inserting into that. That's what really makes it fun. It's, thinking of Dave actually doing that.
Yeah. A lot of times I have to say, radio prank phone calls, as somebody who, I'll admit it, I grew up on Z100, for those not from New York. That was our top 40 pop station. Originally it was rock, and then it became the most generic top 40 thing. Their morning zoo prank phone calls, you could clearly hear they were edited, that they were chopped. If you listen closely, you can go, oh, okay, they gave them a preamble to go, hey, so we're going to be doing a funny call. And you listen to that. This call that you do with that one particular club, the guy keeps hanging up, you keep calling back. And I love how each time, or maybe it's the second time, you go, I think we got off on the wrong foot here.
Yes. So the first thing, one of the, something I know was a first with that phone call was the talk in between. Was something that other people had started doing after, being that I was doing it in character.
Yeah.
It was me speaking in between the guy being on the phone. What the hell is this world coming to? Damn. And then when I get back on the phone with him, so I would keep that character going, and you would hear him talking to himself, then getting back on the phone with the guy. Then he'd hang up again. And then but the funniest line is when I say, who do you think this is, Sammy Hagar? I mean, that was just, and I love Sammy, by the way. I was lucky enough to do Sammy's, to work with Sammy and do his Friends show in 2000. I'm sorry, my God. Yeah, 2013. And I did his Sammy and Friends with Michael Anthony. And he had asked me to come on, and we had such a blast, and I did Dave for him. But
wait. I'm sorry. I told you I was going to let you go here, but Sammy Hagar asked you to do the David Lee Roth impression, or you did it for him?
Yeah. He had a show. He did a special called Sammy and Friends in 2013. And I did it. And it was him and Michael Anthony. And we had mutual friends. And then their office called and got my number. And and then I did the show. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. So but for the record, I am not like a Roth, not only Roth Sammy guy. Right. I love both guys. I'm a huge fan of Sammy Hagar. I think he's it's a different band. You can like both. You can like chocolate and vanilla. You can like Coke and Pepsi. You can like both of them. There's no rule that says you only have to like one thing ever. I wish more people would get behind that, because anytime you post anything about Roth online, these Sammy people attack it and vice versa. You go, shouldn't you both be happy that Eddie Van Halen worked with both of them and made great music? But alas, I think what people are more, pissed off about is the fact that they didn't make more music together in the prime. I wasn't a big fan of the album that came out in 2012, A Different Kind of Truth. I didn't think it sounded like Van Halen. I thought It sounded like a David Lee Roth solo album, believe it or not, and it didn't have Michael Anthony's vocals on it. So for me, I didn't capture it. So if they had, who knows what they would, it's like saying if Randy, what other great duos was split apart, and who knows, what they would have created had they still kept it going.
A different kind of truth is a slow burn, where the first 5 times I heard it, I went, I don't like this, based on the song Tattoo. And 2-3 years ago, I re-listened and went, wow, it's solid as you dig into it. If you started from track 3 or 4 and you get in, you will learn to love A Different Kind of Truth.
Oh, there were cuts on the album I thought Stay Frosty, and there was a couple of tunes I had heard. But to me, it didn't have that essence of Fair Warning, 84, like when they were in the prime. It was hard to explain, or the background vocals of Michael Anthony, which, in my opinion, are the signature sound. I think Wolfie did an amazing job. I mean, I think it was great. He's a great kid. He's a really, really humble, incredible musician. He's dealt with things well. I feel bad for what happened with his pop.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock on Sammy, on Wolfie at all. He's great. I think he was very gracious. And from what I understand, I think he was pushing for a Michael Anthony reunion. And that's what I would have liked to have seen, at least the final, what that would have sounded like. But you got to remember, even Dave doesn't sound the same anymore. So that's where you lost. There's a 20, 30 year gap, 84, 94, 2000, 2014, so there's like a 30-year gap. And then they come out, and it's just like a different band at that point,
Agreed. Well, easier question. Where should we be looking online to hear the greatest and the latest from Billy Mira?
Well, you can go to my website, and I'm horrible with social media, terrible, but you can go to my Instagram, Billy Mira, Billy Mira. Follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on my Billy Mira and the Hitmen. And then you can also, get me on Instagram, but I don't use Twitter a lot.
You're not a Snapchat guy. You're not a TikTok guy.
Oh, my website, Billy. You can go to billymira.com, billymira.com, and I'm always doing a lot of. Right now, I do a lot of like lounge shows, and I do that, and until 2022 when I come back. But I will be hopefully out there nationally within the next year. So that's what I'm really just keeping my fingers crossed and get back on the road. But the show, it's very expensive. It has to be paid. It's a bit of a production. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we'll get it back out.
Paltrocast.